Hi, Christine. Jeff Allen here. I think I told you several weeks ago that I would happen to be in Canada, but I want to follow up with it because I saw your post here on LinkedIn the other day about the Truth and Reconciliation National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. I want to mention how I found that really significant during the 3 week trip to Canada. I was on vacation for 3 weeks. And the two of us, we were in Quebec City. Quebec City. We went to Montreal, went to Ottawa, and then Peterborough outside of, which is an hour and a half outside of Toronto, and in Toronto, and in the Niagara Falls area, and up in the Algonquin Park for some camping for a day. And I was really what we did is we for each of these places we decided to do guided tours, several guided tours in each of the cities or towns, and we did three of them. We did a walking tour, we did a bus tour, and did a boat tour in Quebec City and the area, and then I think we did at least two or three in Montreal as well, at least a bus, and I think we did two bus trips in Montreal, and we didn't do the walk. Came out to do the walking tour. I think no, we did a walking tour too as well. Yes, we did. And then Ottawa, we did the Senate, uh, and we did another one. There was a walking tour by the local the tourism office, and then we went to the Canoe Museum in Peterborough, and I think we did some other ones there too. And we did a boat trip there too, on the largest what they call the lift locks, and then and then we Niagara Falls. We did a in the Niagara on the river. We did on the lake Niagara on the lake. We did a guided visit as well. So we did quite a few visits, and every single one of them mentioned. I mean, every one of them, especially the one in Ottawa, mentioned the Reconciliation Act in Canada, and I was really impressed by that. Now, when I was young, when I was a teenager, when I was 15, 16 years old, I went up and worked in the Indian reservation up in Victoria, British Columbia, up in the Prince George area, and so I've seen, lived in that the context a little bit, helping out with the on the reservations there a little bit, and had considered going and working on up in Alaska too and some of the islands during my early college years, but I didn't get to do that. And later on because I've done a lot of technology stuff, I was an advisor on the computer aided translation for Alaska Native languages product called Catanol, which didn't really get very far for a few reasons of funding. But what I've really been impressed with, and coming from the States, there has been a similar situation for the First Nations. What I really liked about Canada's thing is call them the First Nations. There's a term for that, and that's really good. And there's the term for the idea of the reconciliation and truth. I mean, stating the truth, and the reconciliation is a follow up to an active follow up to it. And I mean, I grew up in the Cub Scouts. I was in Cub Scouts, and we told the stories about Thanksgiving and all that. Now I'm later in life. I really don't like to celebrate Thanksgiving because the United States really hasn't done anything about this at all. And I'm kind of ashamed about it, having worked myself for the past 35, 40 years on languages, minority languages, and we call them low data languages or whatever in computer science and computer, linguistic sciences. But I feel kind of ashamed of doing it because there was never really doing anything for it, and there's a lot of debates and fights over it in the United States. But being on the trip in Canada, that kind of changed my view of that and how it is possible to try to do things, and to honor the First Nations and to have monuments. I mean, to actually take the the flame. I can have the flame there in Ottawa. They added the Nunavut province into that after it had been made, right? So there was a really, and having monuments that have First Nations, some statues that added that in significant places in Ottawa and other places. It was really touching to see that. And I think that that's really, at least it's an attempt to deal with this, to deal with the history without trying to tear down statues and monuments that already exist. There's that whole thing of that kind of I guess that's the cancel culture, right? And one in the United States saying, well, we're going to remove these monuments of anything that dealt with slavery or anything that dealt with these things. They're trying to just forget it, right? But that's not the way that they can get around it. I mean, that's not going to solve anything. Forgetting it doesn't mean that you're going to address it, right? It just means that you forgot it, which we don't forget because things come through culture, things come through generations of cultures, and that's really hard to forget. Even the French and the Quebecs, it's the folks from Montreal, they feel bad that the French abandoned them several hundred years ago, right? So there's a bit of that feeling as I've talking with all of the folks in Montreal on the tourist trips, the guided tours, and talking about that. And I think that with the whole Truth and Reconciliation in Canada, there's an attempt to really address this. I lose an attempt. I mean, it's never going to be. It's really hard to deal with this, right? But really making moves to honor those First Nations in the ways they've been done, and to address it. And I really wish that the United States could get their act together and try to move this in this direction, and not just continue to just say there was extermination. I mean, there were other reasons for the death of the Indians too. A lot of it was dealt to sicknesses that were brought by the Europeans who colonized the area. But there was really, I think, the United States, because it's not really, it's really a federation of individual states, really, and so it's not really. I mean, Canada does have a similar thing with the provinces and separately run provinces, but there's still an idea of the federal government still having be able to bring together and have laws that are going to do it, whereas it doesn't really work in the States as well. And I think that's one of the things, it's so segmented in the United States. It's really hard to address these kinds of things on a national level, especially in education in general. So I just want to mention that and talk about the experience of that and how it's kind of changed my perspective of the future of this topic. I think Canada's it's attempting to go in the right way, right? It's really going the right way with this, and others can learn from that. And then you got to deal with, I mean, the whole Latin America with the indigenous cultures there, and that was my I did my master's and doctorate degrees on the Caribbean languages, so the Caribbean Creole languages, which came from the Arawak. There was influence from the Arawak Indians and their languages from the continent that were brought out to the islands, and that that's a whole nother area of the history of looking at what happened in Central and South America as well, especially South America, with the colonization and people get wiped out. The mission, the film, I think the mission was 1984. And that addressed it. He addressed it in I think in a significant way to say what had happened. And I think there's more that needs to be done about it, and that's great to see that there's an attempt to not just dwell on the past of the negative stuff, but trying to say where we're going to go in the future, right? And how to help, like with the rise of Indigenous women here with Jessica, and looking at it as what can be done, but not forgetting the past. So thanks for the post, and thanks for giving some things to think about. And I'm really glad I had that trip to Canada. That really kind of changed my perspective on this. Thanks for listening.